Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
Hola, I'm Hernán Braberman.
Oh, thank you. I never even attempted to learn any Spanish, and the I can't even roll an R correctly. But anyway, um, I've heard enough to know that I'm not even going to attempt to slaughter. Like, no, no, no. Anyway, Craig off on his self. What do you call that? Self-aware. Oh God, I'm bad at languages. But hey, welcome. Thank you for taking the time. I we do, as everybody knows by now, we do a little pre-discussion, and I have certain ways that I start, but I don't always go where the guest thinks I'm going to go after. So I also like to pitch curveballs. One of the things that we were talking about before we hit record, we actually started touching on design, and I'm going to say people who are in the Venn diagram that know both you and me, they probably know you from being a remarkable, or maybe they were with you in the first podcast course that you took. And you're probably best known in that group for doing or helping with people doing cover art for their shows. And cover art is really hard if you're not a designer. Maybe if you're a designer, it's hard but fun. And you and I started talking about I said, well, does doing cover art for podcasts scratch the same itch that doing package design does? And what I was kind of myself curious about there was package design sounds like a really specific, although it's everywhere, right? It strikes me as a very specific type of design. It's like somewhere between visual design, where like it involves visual design, but also involves user interface. Like if we're designing a package for peanut butter, like how is the all these things? So tell me a little bit about what about cover art design do you think is like your unique experience with package design? How does that play into, or like, what is it about cover art design that you see parallels package design?
Yeah, I think there is certainly a parallel uh, regarding storytelling because you want your audience, your potential audience, to be drawn to your show.
Mm.
The first point of contact, or mostly, that would be like this little thumbnail of that cover art.
Tiny
And
little thumbnail.
yeah, and that tiny little thumbnail must convey something regarding your show, something that will draw attention towards it. Should be visible. That's something very similar to what happens with consumer goods on a supermarket. In these
Mm.
cases, supermarket shelf are these podcast directories, so you have
Mm.
to have visibility and like a kind of shopability, something that you have to tell a story, like a visual trailer, kind of visual trailer, like an entrance to the narrative story of your podcast. So it's like a very tiny story in a square footprint. Of course, it should reflect you, and then also once your audience gets used to it, be like a shortcut to finding your new episode. So
Mm.
it's very interesting because it's although it's visual, it's not audio. Uh, it it
Right.
it's like it should match that story. It should be yours and also be very attractive for your potential listeners.
I love the way you make the point about how it's supposed to tell a story. Like, because now I'm going, oh, you know what? I really didn't think about that. I have a couple of different shows and they all have cover art. And pretty much the cover art for the things that I have done has been, well, I need to put art on the cover. And that's like the limit of what I've thought about. And sometimes I've even thought, oh, I'm just going to make it a white square, and I'm just going to go and like, oh, the Beatles did that, right? So it's like, oh, all the good things have been done. And I'm wondering, like, what do you think are some suggestions? Like, how do I to me, I always think about how do I break a problem down so that I can figure out like where are the edges of the problem space? Like what are the things I could possibly do? And I'm just wondering, like, okay, if I don't have any clue what story I'm even trying to tell with my podcast, even with one episode, let alone with the whole thing, how do I begin to figure out what would be a good mini story to try and tell, like with the cover art? Like, how do I even figure out where to get my hands on? Do I start with trying to convey a particular emotion and then build a story, or do I try and start with a color, or do I start with I throw darts and the first thing that comes to mind and then just riff around that? Like, what are some ways? And I know there's probably not one right way, but what are some ways to begin to crack that?
I guess you could start with like an idea map. For example, let's say this podcast. Um, Start thinking about, is it about like a casual conversation? Yeah, it's about you. It's about podcasters. So there you can start to find like visual metaphors to convey that.
Hmm.
Do you want it to look casual? Do you want to look it quite formal? That attributes, emotional and functional, could be expressed by shapes, by colors, by typography. So I will start by tracing just with words these different ideas, and then try to. Of course, design has a limitless alternatives in terms of how you can find a solution. There is not. Of course, you should take into consideration that the finally the cover art has to be very synthetic to convey everything in like 1 per 1 centimeters, or a very very
Right.
tiny image and some colors. But for example, in I guess this podcast has like a P in the
Yeah. Big red P.
it's a P, but it's quite standard. So and I don't feel this podcast to be standard. It has something different, like a different flavor. It's like casual. So that like very standard
Generic,
P.
maybe. Yeah.
It doesn't convey what this is about. It's like it's
I'm
something
hanging my
like
head in shame. You're right.
yeah.
You're right.
So I guess there are opportunities to
Yeah.
enhance it, but it could be started with that conversations, casual conversation, the name of the podcast, your name. There are a lot of ways to understand what this is about and try to convey just a little. It's impossible. The final product is this conversation, but
Right.
it should be at least do honor with the conversation and not look like like this was just an afterthought and just 1 minute
I'm so
like
busted.
typing epi.
um,
I'm not saying it's a bad.
I know.
No.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing self-aware, at myself. Um, when you do, this is like a bit of a left turn. When you do designs, like in your day job, how often do you find that you come up with something, and then I'm assuming there's like a review process internally where you show it to someone and you get like feedback? How often do you go in with an idea and then go, no, that sucks? Like, how often do you just like scrap it when when you get somebody else's input, versus how often does it become like their input improves it and the thing is like an upward spiral where it gets better and better, versus how often do you chuck it? And the reason I'm asking is because I feel like I want to chuck like everything all the time. Like, oh, I don't like it, so I want to like throw it all out and start over. And I'm wondering if that's the right instinct, or whether no, I probably should try to continue. And so I'm wondering if you have a feel for how often your first instincts tend to carry you to the finished thing versus when you completely shift entirely.
I guess if you start with a conceptual methodology, it will be easier for you to take that kind of decisions. If you state the main objective of what you want
Mm.
what you want to convey, it will be easy to translate it at least into like a kind of brief, very small, very a brief, and then start exploring and asking yourself, is this like a is this conveying what I want to convey? If it's like if there is like a chance to hit the nail, I guess it would be interesting to refine the idea or try different colors. Or but if you feel
Mm.
that that's kind of away from where you started, I will start again. But also, I would advise you to work with at least 3 different routes from just from the beginning, not try to
Mm.
get the idea and then refine. That it would be better uh, to bet to at least three different ideas and move forward in parallel, and then stop, perhaps get some feedback from your peers or your potential audience, and then move forward refining.
I don't want to turn this into the Craig learns how to fix his cover art. So I want to be mindful of like where we are. Do you find that, all right? So the thing that you're kind of known for in podcasting circles, like the people that are going to be listening to this, is around design, and that's sort of your wheelhouse, right? This is what Hernan does normally.
Yeah.
Um, do you wish that you could break free of that sometimes? Like, do you wish you could, like, I want to go just be the completely different person than I am in my workaday life, or do you just so love design that you're happy to
Mm.
just do that in every context?
I think I do it in every context. I fell in love with design at 15 years old, at least around that age. I'm still in love with that profession. I
Mm,
like translating things into images or into shapes or virtual
mm,
virtual world. So I like to think that design is like it strives to embellish the relationship between people and products, brands, podcast.
mm.
So it's about embellishing, and embellishing is not just about beauty. It's about like something functional. It's also beauty. So it's about like streamlining that relationship, and so in that way it's like never ending and very challenging.
Mm. I think that's all fascinating. Can you tell me about either a designer or a particular design? Like, my brain is leaping to, like, I've seen some amazing subway map designs that are just right. And there's the one from New York City, I think, is a classic example of
Yeah.
of design. But are there any particular designers, or somebody's particular design that really, um, I'm going to say, like, change the way you look at design? So, you've maybe had an idea of what design could do, and then you saw someone's work or saw someone and realized that there was a whole nother space to design that you hadn't been looking for, like a real mind altering experience that you
Ah,
had with someone or someone's work.
yeah, yeah, and it has to do with podcasting because when I was 15 years old, I saw an article about an Spanish designer who is called Javier Mariscal, and he's a designer who doesn't uh, put a surname to design. It's just design. He does graphic design, product design, media design, film,
Mm.
sculpture. So
Whew.
he taught me about that design has no surname. Um, I wanted to, as soon as I saw that, it blew my mind, and I wanted to become a designer. And he was. I managed by starting my podcast. I managed to interview him, and it was like mind blowing. Of course,
Mm.
to have the chance because of this, like to have the opportunity and the excuse to reach him and talk with him and even like feel friend to him.
Right.
So that's fantastic, and that's the power, I think, of podcasting.
I would definitely agree. My questions are getting harder and harder. When you were interviewing him for your show, was there anything that surprised him about podcasting? Because I'm guessing he's probably not a very frequent podcast guest. Was there anything about podcasting that surprised him?
um he's like he's kind of politically incorrect, so I guess
I know exactly what you mean.
yeah, he enjoyed the opportunity to insult and say
Mm,
whatever he wanted to say, and he was like kind of surprised when I published the episode because I didn't edit some parts that usually in a formal interview would have
mm.
been left out. So he said that it was like a great job.
It's I'm glad to hear you say that because I often wonder, it's tough as a podcaster to really find out what other people really think about something you've created. Because if you're, like if, afterwards, if I say to you, hey, what'd you think of the episode? It's so hard for you because your experience, you can't separate your experience from like when you hear it, it's not the first time you heard it. And
No.
it's so neat to hear, to hear him say that it was really fun to hear like the thing that I felt that I experienced, it actually came out the other end. That's neat. Um, Anything else spring to mind that you want to talk about now that we're a little further afield and I've been pulling us all over the place here on the mind map?
No, I think that podcasting is there are certain aspects that, of course, overlap design in terms of thinking ahead, and like projecting the structure or the script, or designing the moments within the episode, the music. So it's
Mhm.
also, of course, it's a design activity in its own terms.
It's I didn't realize it was, well, it doesn't have to be creative. I guess I could I could do a really bad job of it, but I didn't realize how much opportunity there is for being creative within in the medium. And in
Yeah.
hindsight, duh, right? Like, of course there is because it's a completely blank canvas. So yeah, if you're going to cover it with something, you're going to have to be creative. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy, not just being creative myself, because I do almost nothing that's just me talking on a microphone, but the opportunity to start with a blank space and have a second person join me. It gets really fun when there's 3 or 4 people total.
Mm,
Those can be really fun because the people on the other side, I've had them just like take control, and I'm just like, this is great. I don't do anything. I could just sit here for half an hour and enjoy the conversation that they're creating. So I really think that creativity is something that I really enjoy as a big part of what I enjoy about it.
yeah, yeah. Also, sound is incredible, its power on podcasting. So yeah, there are a lot of tools that we should use in favor of the story that we want to tell, even though perhaps it's just a conversation or something more formal, but it's an endless medium.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I would normally say that's a great place to stop, but I want to do one more thing.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I asked you about podcasting, and you had a beautiful metaphor for it. And I'm not even going to set it up. I'm just going to say, can you unpack that metaphor for us? Because I think that was really an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that there is like an analogy with scuba diving. It's a different medium. It's looking at the sea is mesmerizing and fearful at the same time. Once you enter, you can explore. Your voice will sound different because it's a different atmosphere. it's the time moves in in a different pace, and in your oxygen tank, you should find what moves you to dive. No? In my case, it's about learning, sharing, curiosity, like a control exposure that I get, and it's also an intimate connection within that space. Once when you are right now talking with you, and then also an intimate connections with the audience, especially if the audience is drawn to the episode. But that's magic.
Terrific. Hernan, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's a pleasure.
Gracias, Craig.